Внимание! Система периметр активирована.
Враги подходят со стороны! Не пытаются обойти! Прикройте меня! Прикройте меня!
Внимание! Система периметр активирована.
From 1947 to 1991, the world lived on the edge of extinction. Missiles in silos, spies in the shadows, a financial battleground still unknown to most. A doctrine to end all life as a deterrent to open war. That was the Cold War, and some say it never really ended.
I'm gonna blow you out!
This is Dead Hand Radio, your source for Cold War history. Our mission, to decode the strategic use of psychological warfare, black budgets, espionage, and nuclear brinkmanship, to uncover the hidden power structures still shaping our world.
My guest on this episode is the Honorable Everard Bob Richards, former Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance of Bermuda. With decades of experience in both the public and private sectors, Mr. Richards has played a pivotal role in shaping Bermuda's economic policy and enhancing its global financial reputation. Throughout his career, he managed international investment portfolios, founded Bermuda's first independent investment firm, and represented the country at top-level global financial forums, including meetings at the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. He also served as General Manager of the Bermuda Monetary Authority and has held leadership roles in government since 1997. In this conversation, we delve into Cold War history, geopolitics, and finance, exploring nuclear tensions and the enduring effects of that era on today's world. We'll also discuss Bermuda's role during this period and what inspired Bob's post-political career as an author. Welcome, Mr. Richards. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I'd like to start with some broad strokes about your career. Can you walk us through your roles in both finance and government?
I've had a career in finance ever since leaving university, which was a long time ago. I had various jobs in banks and regulatory authorities. I ended up being an investment manager for Shell Trust in Bermuda, which was a trust set up to manage the assets of Shell overseas workers, the pension fund, basically. So I got into being an investment manager there. I got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug and decided foolishly to start my own company, my own investment company. That is one heck of an experience, I can tell you. But eventually, after 7 years, we got some traction, and the company became moderately successful. Sort of overlapping that, though, I mean, Bermuda is a very small place, and it's common for people to have like overlapping careers. I have to confess, I come from a political family. My father was in politics. So the political bug bit me, even though I'd sworn as a young man I would never go into politics. I got into politics in the late 90s. And I was in the Bermuda Senate from 1997. And they made me a minister of telecommunications. So I was there for about 2 years. We had an election. My party lost the election. So exited politics for about 3 or 4 years, went back in about 2003, back into the Senate. And then I got elected in 2007 into Parliament. I was a spokesman for finance for my party. So we spent quite a few years, 10 years in the wilderness, political wilderness, during a time when Bermuda's economy really started to fail. So there was an election in 2012, in December 2012, that the people of Bermuda, in their wisdom, decided to change the government. So my party got elected, and I became Minister of Finance. And I was Minister of Finance until I retired in 2017. And then I discovered that what happened was I decided to write something down about what happened to the Bermuda economy and some of the things that we did during my tenure as finance minister to try to correct it. I decided to write that because if somebody else had written it, they probably would have gotten it wrong. So I wrote that and put it out as a book. It was only for sort of local circulation, a book called Bermuda Back from the Brink. And I never thought I could write a book. I'd never written one before. I never really thought about being an author. But after having written that book, I got an idea that maybe I could actually write something more fun than writing about economics and finance. And I've always been interested in history, particularly 20th century history, having lived through a good deal of it myself. But Bermuda's untold role in geopolitics.
Hey, if you don't mind, can I stop you right there, because we're gonna dive into that real deep in a few minutes. I just want to get to one other thing before we go into the influences that drove you, or you call it getting bit by the bug, for becoming an author.
Yeah.
But looking back, how did the Cold War, and that's primarily what we're going to talk about, how did that sort of shape your life and guide you in making decisions to, one, go into finance and politics, and then ultimately becoming an author?
Well, one of the unique things about growing up in Bermuda in the 50s and 60s, like I did, was that Bermuda was, I guess you could use the word inundated with military people. So when I was growing up, there were military people from Great Britain, from the United States, and from Canada here at the same time. The U.S. had 2 bases in Bermuda. The British had the dockyard. The Canadians were doing something that I really haven't figured out what they were doing yet, but I know we had a Canadian facility. And so that these service people were all around us. As a matter of fact, growing up, we had a family, a GI, who was living in a house right behind my house. And and he had 3 children, and we were all friends. So they were in and out of our house, and I was in and out of their house. So as a Bermudian, kind of grew up with Americans, particularly all around us. And I think that had a very significant influence on me. I didn't really know what the guy was doing. Matter of fact, I still don't know what he was doing. He was just working at the Air Force Base. He was not anybody senior, that's for sure. I don't think he was a pilot, though, but he was employed at the base. But the base folks got a lot of special things that Bermudians didn't get. So, like in those days, the base had their own TV station. There was no Bermuda TV station. we didn't have TV, and but we used to watch American TV through the base television station as children. So we kind of got a big taste of the American presence as children, being around. At least I did. But of course, all the Brits were around too. But that was more, the British presence was more official than unofficial, because the British were to some extent related to the government, etc. But the Royal Navy had, in those days, had a pretty big base in what we call the dockyard, the Royal Navy dockyard, when I was growing up. So the military presence in Bermuda was almost overwhelming in the 50s and 60s during the Cold War. And if you were a kid like I was that liked ships and planes, you were living in paradise, because every type of warship imaginable was out there to be seen every day. Every type of American, particularly American Air Force planes, whether they be fighter planes, bombers, or transports, were flying all around all the time. So this is the world that I grew up in. It was almost as though I grew up on a base, even though I didn't.
Right. It sounds, to be a kid during that period, does sound like it would be an interesting experience.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. Fantastic.
You chose to go to college and then go directly into finance as opposed to going in the military. What kind of shaped that decision?
Well, when I was, I guess, 10 or 12, if you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be captain of a destroyer, a Royal Navy destroyer. Yeah. Right? That's what I wanted to be. But eventually, I got interested in science, and I decided that I really wanted to be a meteorologist, and so that was what I wanted to be when I was in high school. But things change and people change, and I started out in engineering school, but ended up in economics. So in Canada, because that's where I went to university. So the Canadian Bermudian connection historically is extremely strong. So a lot of people in Bermuda went to university in Canada back in those days. Still do, incidentally. Yeah.
So fast forwarding a little bit, two major events in the 1960s impacted the world: the assassination of JFK, and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
And I'm sure you remember both of those incidents very well.
I remember where I was, particularly the JFK one. Yeah.
And most people do. Everybody I've asked seems to know the exact place and time that they at least heard about the assassination.
That's right. That's right.
But and include in this question the Cuban Missile Crisis, because you did live through that period as well, and that was pretty scary for a lot of people.
It was. Yeah.
But can you just describe your feelings and how those moments in history impacted you directly?
Well, the thing was that, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I was 13. So I really didn't have a full appreciation of the knife edge the world was on, right? I more got a sense that there was something terrible that could happen from the reaction of my father rather than me. And so we knew there was something, dramatic that was happening. Incidentally, we used to get by that time we had a TV station in Bermuda, but we used to get the CBS News, but we used to get it a day late. They put it on the film and they put it on a plane and send it down here. Because you got yesterday's news today, right?
So, but you guys had radio, right? Did they have radio broadcast?
So, yeah, we had radio. We had radio. We had radio, but in terms of the television part of it, where you could see the ships and with the missiles on the deck and all that sort of stuff, you really didn't. Whatever it is that we saw, it was a day late. I can tell you that. But it's only later that I realized that the seriousness, the true seriousness of the situation, and the truth is that not many of us here in Bermuda Bermudians really understood the true nature and importance of the military facilities in Bermuda.
Wow.
And there are a lot of people, you read my book, Triangle of Blood, you'll see that there was a lot of interaction between Bermudians and people on the base. A lot of Bermudians used to work at the base and civilianized jobs. And most of them, didn't have a clue what was going on these bases. But the ones that did, like the subject of the book is the SOFAR stuff, and there were a lot of Bermudians working at SOFAR. They were kind of sworn to secrecy. And so they never told anybody what they were doing. So the average Bermudian really had no clue what was going on around them. And that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, because people saw these bases here. They read about their normal lives. Nobody was bombing Bermuda, so everything must be all right. We still had tourists coming here, so we were making money, so everything was cool. But behind the scenes, this thing was going on, and most of us didn't know about it.
So how did you become aware of it? Was it later in life, or?
Yes, much later in life. I became aware of it. One of my friends' father worked at SOFAR, and when I decided to start writing, I started to do some research, and I realized that, hey, this is really important. When the Americans left after the Cold War was over, by that time I was kind of in politics, and they just basically upped and left. Just left everything. It's like they went to lunch, right, and never came back. So there was a facility in the west end of Bermuda called Tudor Hill, where the listening post was, where the undersea cables landed, and they were listening and analyzing the signals. I went in there shortly after everybody left, and as I said, still they all went to lunch, but there was a big facility there, very sophisticated, the kind of devices that the average person, which would have been me, would have no clue what they were for, with the exception of this large map that was at the end of this long room, a map of the Atlantic, a large map of the Atlantic. And there were 4 little lights on that map in the middle of the ocean, lights that clearly could be moved around, right? And those were submarines that they were tracking, right?
Cool.
I became intrigued with this whole Cold War thing at that time, and so when I retired, I started to research it. And fortunately, research is just so much easier today than it was 40 years ago. So we have a very good museum in Bermuda, a maritime museum, that was also helpful. But the most helpful for me for the research was there are a number of these local Bermudian people who used to work at SOFAR who are still alive, which is really helpful.
For sure. Yeah, great.
Really helpful.
First-hand witness accounts are.
That's right. That's right. And
that's gold.
They
for
kind of
an
have
author.
a website that they contribute to called sofarbda.org. Which they kind of post pictures of themselves and old times, all sort of old war stories and that sort of stuff.
Nice plug, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully they get some traffic.
Yeah. And so I found out about that, and I learned a lot about what they were doing from their website. And the guy who does the website, who's responsible for the website, I interviewed him, and then I discovered that there's a friend of mine who worked at SOFAR as a young man that I didn't even know about. I didn't know that he worked there. He's an engineer, and I always thought that he worked at a local engineering company. But as a sort of teenager, he worked at SOFAR as an engineer. And the thing was that there were people around that I could interview, and I was able to interview them to get insights
that's great.
into what's going on. So it was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very cool. Yeah, I would have 1,000 questions to ask people like that.
Yeah. And the thing is that I have a kind of PowerPoint presentation. I've made a few sort of presentations to people around Bermuda about the facts behind the book, right? And my friend who used to work there, he came to one of those seminars. He brought his wife, and after I finished, she told me that she'd been married to Ed for 25 years, and she learned more about what he did at SOFAR than she learned from him in the last 25 years.
That's cool.
Because he never told her anything about it, right?
So that brings up a whole. I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction than I had planned, because that's so intriguing. But the first question I have to ask you: did you, as a former government official writing a book, did you have to go through any kind of approval process by the government before you could publish?
No.
A lot of former DoD personnel, they have to go through this process. But I guess because yours is more in the realm of fiction.
Yeah, well, it's historical fiction. But when I wrote this thing, Cold War was over.
Yeah.
So I mean, that didn't have even occurred to me, and I don't think it occurred to anybody in the government either.
Well, it's out now, so you can't put that genie back in the bottle.
That's
right. And then the other question I had was regarding your interviews with your witnesses. Do those people still have NDAs in place when going back to the time that they were working for the military?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
Some of the things that I've discovered would have been pretty secret. I mean, one of the things that the SOFAR guys used to do, they had this research vessel. They used to do it by aircraft as well. They were involved in calibrating the accuracy of the American Polaris missile. So they go out to some point X in the middle of the Atlantic, drop some sonar buoys in a sort of 7-mile radius circle, and sort of bugger off about 10 miles. And at an appointed time, this a dummy warhead from this missile would strike, hopefully, inside that circle. And it's traveling at 11,000 miles an hour, so you can't miss it. And then it would sink down in the ocean to the SOFAR channel, and then there would be a bomb, a sort of depth charge that would explode once it was in the SOFAR channel. And all the SOFAR listening posts, the sort of SOSUS listening posts, would pick it up, and they would use the directions from that to sort of triangulate to exactly where that missile landed, and as opposed to where it was supposed to land, right?
It just occurred to me, you're using some acronyms that people might not know.
Yeah.
SOFAR and SOSUS. Can you explain what those are?
Sure. SOFAR is an acronym that stands for Sound, Fixing, and Ranging. It is sort of like as opposed to sonar, which is sound, navigation, and ranging. Sonar can be active sonar. You ping somebody, the sound hits it, bounces back. You measure the time difference, and you can tell where the thing is. The problem is with that, when you ping somebody, they can hear you. They know they're being pinged. With what was going on here and so far, it was all passive. So they were just listening. There was no sending out of a signal at all. They discovered it was a new science. It's something that I have to sort of emphasize, that the science of how the sound travels through the ocean, open ocean, was a relatively new science. It was something nobody really knew about it during World War II, and it was as an emerging science. So in Bermuda, we had two facilities. What I've described as the SOFA facility, which was actually a civilian SOFA station, was a civilian facility. It was located very close to McKinley Field Air Force Base, but it was a civilian facility that was operated by Columbia University. And their job was to go out into the ocean, send out the research vessels, and do the measurements in the ocean to help to build up the data background for the science of how sound travels through the open ocean. And what they've discovered was that there was an area of the ocean, not too shallow and not at the bottom, but in between the shallow water and the super deep water, there was a channel in which sound gets trapped. So, if the guy whale tries to communicate with the gal whale and she happens to be 1,000 miles away, he can do it because he can start to sing in the SOFA channel, and that sound will travel all the way, or halfway around the world, quite frankly. So was the development of this science was being facilitated at the SOFA station in Bermuda. Contemporaneous to that, you had this listening post at thing that I've described as Tudor Hill. So they were using the science that was being developed in one part of Bermuda. That they're using it to increase their ability to listen to sounds in the ocean and to develop technologies, not only to hear those sounds, but to analyze those sounds. So all that was going on here at the same time. So when you hear me talk about the SOFA station, I'm basically talking about the civilian station where they had the research vessels, and they were developing the science of how sound travels through the open ocean. Tudor Hill was super secret, was run by the U.S. Navy. Nobody knew what was going on up there. And there was also the third piece of this puzzle was something that we call the Argus Tower, which was, it's kind of looked like a small offshore oil rig. It was 25 miles off of southwest of Bermuda on a seamount called the Argus Seamount. The water there was about 190 feet deep, but the open ocean around Bermuda, is about 3,000 feet, right? So they laid submarine cables off of the Argus Tower in various directions with hydrophones on them. And as the cables went down the sides of the seamount into the deep ocean, they would be in the SOFA channel. And so they were able to pick up sounds in the ocean from thousands of miles away, send them back to Tudor Hill, analyze them, and try to determine what sounds were natural and what sounds were man-made. And the man-made ones, to try to locate them and track them. And they were successful at doing that. And they were able to track those Soviet submarines the moment they came around Iceland. And they came out through the UK-Iceland gap. They stopped tracking them.
Wow. Very interesting. And so you interviewed people that actually worked in those programs?
I interviewed people that worked at the SOFA station, the civilian station. I was not able to interview any people in Tudor Hill, because I say it was very secret. It's guarded by U.S. Marines 24/7, and even the Argus Tower, which was, you couldn't keep that secret if you were a fisherman. You went out there, you could see it. But the cover story for the Navy was that they were conducting, quote, marine research, unquote. So, so, and actually, I don't know if it was part of the cover or what, but you may recall there was the U.S. Navy had this thing called Sea Lab. Remember Sea Lab?
I've heard something about that.
Yeah, they were trying to see how long people could live underwater.
Oh,
basically.
okay. Yeah.
They had this device used to go down. So one or two of the early Sea Lab things were actually conducted out by the Argus Tower. I have pictures of that. So it kind of reinforced the whole idea that this was just a Navy research site as opposed to an intel site. Right? You know.
And then the entire military picked up and moved out of there in the mid 90s after the end of the Cold War.
That's right.
So that would lead me to believe that they have some type of technology that replaced those tracking technologies.
Well, they may have, but I mean, once the Soviet submarine fleet went back to port, there was no need for it, right? So I mean, I really don't know what they have, but they don't have that anymore. I can tell you that. All right. If you look at a map, I've got a map of the facilities, the SOSUS specifically. I think I used the word SOSUS, which was a naval acronym for Sound Underwater System. I think that's what an acronym for. They had about 7 or 8 SOSUS facilities, and on a map, they look like a fan, and the fulcrum of the fan was Bermuda, and the other parts of the fan were along the east coast of the U.S. One end would have been in the Bahamas, and the northernmost one was in Newfoundland. But that was the SOSUS network, but the fulcrum of the SOSUS network, and I believe the original place that the listening post exercise was here in Bermuda, and there was a great deal of money and it was. I'll tell you one thing, that if a hot war had ever broken out between NATO and the Soviet Union, Bermuda would have been one of the early targets.
Really?
Oh yeah,
because of those listening posts. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's
exactly.
That's fascinating. So, and you, let me focus my thought, because I have a whole list of questions that I want to get to, but this is such an interesting line of discussion. I want to stay on it for a minute.
Okay.
But it sounds like the majority of your knowledge of Cold War activity is centered on Bermuda. Does your knowledge and research expand to other areas of the Cold War?
I guess superficially, yes. But I mean, what I've been doing is to sort of highlight basically an untold story about the Cold War, and Bermuda's involved. As a Bermudian, I've been focused on Bermuda because I know our role in the Cold War is largely untold.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah.
Your area of focus is primarily on the untold story of Bermuda.
Yeah.
And, I think it's fascinating. I think you have kind of carved out a niche that is really unexplored. And
yeah, it is. It is unexplored.
I did want to give you some time a little bit later on to talk more about your book.
Okay.
Your series. You got a series of books, but the reason I asked if you had more broad knowledge about the Cold War and the events that occurred was because a lot of the questions I had were specifically the global impact of the Cold War, and specifically Are you familiar with the beginning, how the Cold War first started? In your research, what did you uncover about why that actually took place?
Well, I think you had allies that became adversaries, um, and they were allies for a specific reason, which was to defeat Hitler. And even before they had finished Hitler off, they were, jockeying to see who is going to be in charge of the world after Hitler, right? So you had the whole scenario with the atom bomb and the development of that, and how the Russians were spying on Americans in the development of that. Churchill was the first person to actually sort of enunciated that, about the Iron Curtain. But it was clear, I think, to leaders that the allies of World War II, it was an alliance of convenience, a hell of an alliance, but it was an alliance of convenience. And once Hitler was gone, the competition to who ruled the post-war era was on, and it kind of took on a life of its own.
And if I could just interject, it went so far to the point of countries were divided in half.
Indeed,
because of that jockeying, as you used the term you used, for control over the vast portion of the planet, which led to in my opinion, the first major conflict between the superpowers, though it was a proxy war.
There's a bunch of proxy war. The first one, I guess, was Korea.
Right? That's right.
And then Vietnam and what have you. But the division of Germany, and I should say the partition of Germany, that's the right word, and Berlin. Incidentally, Bermuda was kind of tangentially involved with that too.
Mm-hmm. I was going to get to that. How so?
Well, the Allies tried not to make the same error that they made at the end of World War One. End of World War One, they decided to punish Germany so severely that somebody got the bright idea that wasn't really a good thing, and because the punishment of Germany was so severe, it gave rise to Hitler.
Yes.
So they had the Marshall Plan after World War II, which is clearly the right way to go. In those days, a lot of the material to rebuild Europe was transported by air. Obviously, some of it would have been transported by sea, but everybody was in a hurry. But the aircraft to transport this stuff couldn't really fly across the Atlantic in one hop. Mm-hmm. So they used to fly here, refuel, and then fly to the Azores, refuel, and then fly into Europe. Mm-hmm. So Bermuda was basically a very large gas station in the early 1950s. In addition to what I would call the legitimate base operations, most of what they were doing at Kinley was refueling aircraft. And as a boy, I remember these planes. As a kid who was plane crazy, it's like 50 or 60 of these things just lined up on the base. And incidentally, the security at the base in Bermuda was extremely relaxed, right?
Yeah.
Which some people might find hard to believe. But because there were so many civilianized jobs at the base, somebody made a decision that they either fly in, 10,000 more GIs to do this job, or you just hire locals to do it. And hiring locals to do it is a hell of a lot cheaper. So a lot of local folks were working at the base. The pay was better than local businesses. Plus, you got to shop at the PX, which was selling stuff at about a quarter of the price you were getting in the city of Hamilton. So a lot of people wanted to work at the base. They got paid US dollars, and it was wonderful, right? So there was a lot of Bermudans going back and forth through the two main gates of the base to the rest of Bermuda. And basically, the guards there were more like policemen, than traffic cops, than security guards, right? So it wasn't a whole lot of security to get on the base. I think once you got on the base, they obviously had secure sections, right? There was a section that was infamously known. Like most, I think, air bases, they had 3 runways in a kind of A formation, and at the foot of the formation was a runway that jutted out into the harbor, and at the end of that harbor was probably the most secure place in Bermuda, and it was thought that they had nuclear tip depth charges out there. And the sort of radiation signs are still out there on the bunkers.
Is that right?
Yeah, still out there on the bunkers.
Is that area accessible to civilians now, or is it still closed off?
It's now it's now part of the airport. So you would have to get permission to go out there. So they had that part that was extremely secure. But there are other parts of the base that I remember as a school kid, we used to have sort of day trips to go out to the base. In addition to 4th of July, which everybody was open for everybody on 4th of July. You could take a day trip out to the base if you made the arrangements as a school teacher. So it was, on the face of it, it wasn't very secure. But in the early days of the Cold War, Bermuda was used as a refueling stop in the material that was being shipped across to Europe to rebuild Europe.
There's another area that you have extensive experience and expertise, and that's the finance sector.
Yeah.
And that was a major battlefield during the Cold War as well. Would it be okay if we talk about a little bit about that?
I'm not sure what you mean, but you go. I'm quite happy to answer anything you have.
Sure. Okay. So this is my segue. One of the lesser discussed aspects of the Cold War is how financial systems were used to fund covert operations.
Right.
Like the Iran-Contra affair.
Sure.
Where off the book money is moved through unofficial channels to support secret operations.
Right.
And just curious if you have any insight from your experience, not direct knowledge, but from your experience of how those clandestine funds, black budget operations occur.
I don't have any knowledge of that. Of course, Bermuda has been accused of being involved in all kinds of nefarious activities in the area of finance. 99% of which are not true. But I think in the early days, just by way of background, Bermuda became involved in the tourism business in a big way because of the Cold War. Because of the basis. So we emerged from World War II with an airstrip that could land any aircraft on Earth, right? Long enough to launch and land B-52s, all right?
Yeah.
So as a commercial place, we could land any airliner in the world. So we were in the tourism business before the island tourism business before almost anybody else, because back in the 50s, 3.5 hours out of New York, you could reach Bermuda, which was considered to be a very, very short flight in those days. And so our whole sort of economic development post-war was predicated on the infrastructure that was built by the U.S. Air Force during the war. We had an airport. None of the other islands had an airport. They also built some roads for us as well, the Americans. So, and they didn't charge us anything for it. Mind you, they made us a target, but we'll forget about that part. So we were in the tourism business. The finance business came a good deal later. Bermuda's never had offshore banks in the classic sense. So, I mean, you go to places like the Bahamas, Cayman, places like that, but particularly the Bahamas back in the day, they're not so much in that business anymore, but they used to be. You could have found a branch of a bunch of banks, British banks, Canadian banks, American banks in those places. They used to call them brass plate banks, right? And they use those banks to funnel money hither, thither, and yon. We never had that in Bermuda because we had two banks that were local banks, homegrown Bermudian banks going back to the 1800s that fought tooth and nail against the setting up of foreign banks in Bermuda. So they wanted all of it for themselves. And these guys were not saints. I don't want to give the impression that these local bankers were saints. They were not. But they had a sense of, if I do something really, really bad, it's going to ultimately reflect on my island and my business. It was just bad for business, bad for long-term bad for business to be engaged in that kind of crap, right? Mm-hmm. So you didn't have it. Not because they were saints. It's just that in their long-term interest, it was not in their interest to do it. Mm-hmm. So you didn't have that kind of element here. I'm not saying that there weren't some people that were hiding money here. They were. But eventually, the whole sort of money laundering stuff that developed in the 70s in a lot of the small islands, we kind of had a regulatory structure here that killed a lot of it. So we didn't have that much, even though if you listen to politicians or people who are uninformed, you would have thought that, we were the greatest money laundering capital in the world. It just wasn't so. It's just a lie. I mean, it just wasn't. But, we got tarred with the same brush. I guess that's what I'm saying. And eventually in the 80s, the insurance business started to take hold, the captive insurance business and then the reinsurance business. And that sort of took us in a different direction and a whole another level. And to the level where after 9/11, the claims after the World Trade Center came down were so huge that a number of insurance companies in the States were going broke trying to pay claims. Mm-hmm. The reinsurance companies in Bermuda wrote checks for over $5 billion. Oh, wow. Just like that. Bam! Wrote the checks. And all of a sudden, the financial world realized, hey, this thing in Bermuda is not just a tax charge. It's real. Yeah. These are real companies, right? These are real insurance companies that pay claims. Hey, one thing insurance companies don't like to do is to pay claims.
Sure.
But when the time comes, you better pay up, or else people are going to think it's the whole thing is fraud. So we paid claims, and after 9/11, and it was like a stamp of legitimacy on Bermuda reinsurance and insurance business that remains to this day. So we're writing checks right now. We're writing checks for fires in California.
Mhm.
Today's paper showed it's over $250 billion claims being written by Bermuda reinsurance companies.
Is that across the board, or is that just in California?
Everywhere in the States.
Okay.
Right. So as fires, hurricanes, whatever, that's kind of like what we do. But the emergence of that came from a different idea, and the different idea was the fact that there was more local involvement in the finance industry in Bermuda than in these other islands. In these other islands, there were branches of foreign banks who didn't really give a damn about the reputation of the jurisdiction that they were dealing with, right? So if something hit the fan, they didn't care. They just close up the bank and move on. But because the original people here were locals, this was their home, they didn't really cared more about the jurisdiction and their long-term interests. And so we had a bunch of regulations. I think I mentioned to you earlier in this talk that in addition to being a banker, I was a regulator.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked in the regulator in Bermuda. It's called Bermuda Monetary Authority. I was an officer in that organization for 6 years. We had kind of regulations in Bermuda that they just didn't have in these other places. And that continues to today. That's what kind of sets us apart from other places.
Well, we're getting pretty short on time.
Okay.
And I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your books. I appreciate you going into depth about that.
All right.
It was a really burning interest of mine to find out more about the finance.
Yeah.
The secret financing that went on behind the scenes during the Cold War.
Yeah.
I thought you might have some insight, at least.
I can't help my hand on my heart and say we weren't involved with it,
mm-hmm.
but I have no knowledge of us being involved with it.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. So after I discovered almost by accident that I had the ability to write a book, which I wrote on the political front, I decided to write a story about Bermuda's involvement in World War II. And I talked to some friends of mine, publishing friends of mine, and they said, well, your best bet is to write a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So I committed to that. So the first book, Triangle of Treason, is written about Bermuda's involvement in World War II and the fight against U-boats and the setting up of American bases in Bermuda for that. It's a spy story. So it's a fictional spy story, but the facts behind it are factual. Bermuda was all mail that went from the United States to Europe and back came through Bermuda.
Really?
And we had a large bureaucracy in Bermuda that opened every piece of mail.
Wow.
All mail was censored during World War II. And the headquarters for that censoring of mail was here in Bermuda. So we had an army of people, mostly women,
mm-hmm.
Who were opening mail. And of course, they had to be masters of a bunch of different languages, right?
Yeah.
So these were not just ordinary people. These were highly educated people, and that was their job to to look at every piece of mail. And they found money, they found jewels, they found all kinds of things that were, because I don't have to tell you that there were a lot of Nazi sympathizers in America.
Yes.
So our principal role in World War II was the censoring of mail and aircraft patrols out of Bermuda. Initially, the Americans were initially supposedly enforcing, it's ridiculous, but anyway, neutrality enforcement. America was neutral, and they were flying neutrality patrols.
Mm-hmm.
But neutrality patrols eventually turned into actual military patrols. And one of the interesting facts of that my research on that front came out was that the U.S. Navy was flying combat patrols against Nazi U-boats out of Bermuda before Pearl Harbor.
Really?
Yeah, a good 6 months before.
Wow.
Yeah. So
before war was declared by the
correct.
US.
That's correct. So their orders of engagement were, if you see a U-boat, bomb it.
Okay.
Right. So that's interesting. So Triangle of Treason is the first book. The second book that we're talking about is Triangle of Blood, which is a Cold War story. Again, it's an untold story about Bermuda's involvement in tracking Soviet submarines in the Atlantic, and the development of that technology and the deployment of that technology. And it's a spy. It's a fictional spy story overlaid on those facts. So there's a lot of facts in there about it. And at the back of the book, there is a sort of glossary as to what's true and what's not. Okay. And there's a fact and fiction page there to let people know, because I think they've been kind of melded in a way where if you didn't know, you might think that everything in that book is fiction, or everything in that book is fact. Mm-hmm. But at the back, just like in Triangle of Treason, I did the same thing. At the back of the book, I tell the reader, well, these are facts, and this other stuff is fiction. The third book, which hasn't been published yet, I'm still working on it, is again a spy story based on Bermuda's involvement in putting a man on the moon. Mm-hmm. Bermuda had a NASA tracking station here that was the most critical of all the tracking stations, because when the rocket lifted off from Cape Canaveral, at T+3 minutes, the rocket came over the horizon in Bermuda, and the booster rockets, first stage and second stage, were still attached, which is the most dangerous part of the mission, right? Mm-hmm. So Bermuda was involved in making sort of go, no-go decisions on space launches. The third book is about that. So,
that's interesting. I had a couple of questions about NASA, the space race, and the moon landing.
Yeah.
We didn't quite get to all of that, but that's really interesting. How soon is that book coming out?
Probably next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I got to give the book that was launched last year a bit more time before I hit the third one. But sure. Yeah, next year.
Is it possible to get autographed copies of your books for
sure.
Anybody? Where would they go to get those copies?
Well, you could come to Bermuda and get one, and I'll do it. The book's available on Amazon in paperback as well as Kindle. Uh-huh. To get an autograph copy, you're gonna have to deal with me. So the books are on sale in local bookstores and at the airport here. But to get an autograph copy, somebody's gonna have to get in touch with me.
And you have a website for people to contact you?
I have a website. www.triangleoftreason.com or www.triangleofblood.com. They're both basically the same website. And it tells you something about both these books.
So two last questions. You can breeze over them, but I want to ask them. For anyone who's just starting out in the study and research of the Cold War,
Yeah.
do you have any tips, books that they should read, films that they should watch? And where would they start their research?
Yeah. That's a good question. There's so many movies about it. I mean, some of them.
Bridge of Spies is a great movie.
Yes. That's a very good movie. Because there've been so much fictional stuff done on the Cold War.
Yeah.
It's hard to most of it is BS, right?
Yeah, I agree. There were some. One of my favorite movies, just talking off the top of my head, is Dr. Strangelove. It's so far out there, but
it is out there.
Such a character,
Peter Sellers, what you expect.
Yeah, he's awesome in that film.
The Hunt for Red October,
a good one,
is a good movie to learn about so far. And so actually in my I try to give these sort of PowerPoint presentations to various people here on the island. And I've got 2 clips from the Hunt for Red October where they actually talk about the SOSUS network and what Sean Connery calls their sonar nets, right? Yeah, and so we actually obliquely mentioned in the movie, right? So if you want to have an understanding of the sort of the underwater warfare and submarine warfare, the shadow warfare of the Cold War, Hunt for Red October was a good movie. But there were a lot of Clancy's books that were Cold War books that were superb. You can learn a whole lot about the Cold War from Clancy.
Oh yeah, Tom Clancy was a master at storytelling, and
also facts, right?
Yeah.
You learn a lot from reading his book.
Yeah. I said I don't know if he's still alive or not.
No, he's gone.
Passed. Okay.
Yeah.
Then the final question I have is there anybody that you could recommend that you can think of who I would be able to talk to? So I guess that concludes our conversation, unless you have any other things that you'd like to mention.
No, I think I'll just thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and it's my honor for you to be a guest on my show. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk with me. Thank you very much.
How does one access your show, incidentally?
It's on Spotify, YouTube, all the podcast channels. It's called Dead Hand Radio.
Right.
And I'm relaunching the website, relaunching the podcast. It was on hiatus for a couple of years, but I've recently got bitten by the bug again. So it's coming back.
Okay, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. Is it Bob, or do you prefer Everett?
No, nobody calls me Everett.
That's such a cool name, though. Why don't you call people call you Ever?
By that name.
All right, sir. Well, I appreciate your time and best of luck to you.
Yeah,
and also, I would love to have you back on the show at a date in the future.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate
absolutely.
It. All right.
Take care. Bob. You take care.
All right. Bye-bye.